So today we're going to talk about C paragraphs. Um, this is a type of paragraph structure that we do in this class, and we'll figure out through this video, what C paragraph stands for and when it is appropriate to use C paragraphs. A good place to start is why do we even care about paragraph structure? Why does it matter? And it helps the reader. I mean, everything we do when it comes to writing and writing structure, it's not done because your teacher wants to make life harder on you. It's done because it's supposed to fit into a genre of academic writing, fit into kind of like the customs of how people approach writing. And in fitting into those customs, it allows the reader to understand what they are reading. It helps them digest that information. All right. So every time the reader, and you should do this as you read, every time the reader approaches a new paragraph, you should think in your mind, well, here's a new idea. All right. And that should help you kind of organize the ideas, both as the reader and as a writer. But paragraph structure also helps the writer. All right. It keeps the writer focused on what points they're making and how those points support the thesis. All right. So when you as a writer start a new paragraph, you need to think to yourself, what is the purpose of this paragraph? What am I trying to accomplish in this paragraph? And you should have a very specific reason for writing that paragraph. All right. It should be to prove a single point that helps that thesis. All right. And in indenting and starting a paragraph, it should be a reminder to you as the writer, what is my goal here? All right. So that's one reason. Well, it helps the writer. And the other reason, same reason why we have punctuation, same reason why we have a thesis statement, same reason why we incorporate quotes, which we'll talk about later. It helps the reader follow your ideas. Okay? It's hard to tell if I'm moving too fast right now because you're not in front of me. But I'll leave this screen up just for a half more second, and you can always push pause if I'm moving too fast. What I've found both as a student and as an instructor, talking with students, is that sometimes paragraph structure is frustrating to students. First of all, you hear a bunch of different ideas for paragraph structure, and you wonder, well, what should I do? What do I do in this class? What do I do in that class? But another one is that it's so prescriptive. So you're being told, I've seen this format right here in high schools. My wife teaches high school. I don't think she teaches this, but it's a good idea, but it's a little confining to where it prescribes every sentence. You have your topic sentence, put a quote. Talk about the quote in 2 sentences, put another quote, talk about that in 2 sentences, concluding sentence. There's no real wiggle room to be artistic, to be creative, to put your own spin on your own writing. Because in a sense, writing is art. You should be able to balance between your opinion, your personality, your style, and relating it to a reader. So you can't just go out and make up your own language and write it down because your reader's not going to be able to find it. That's a little too creative. But at the same time, if you follow a paragraph structure like this, sometimes the writer gets overshadowed, right? So paragraph structure can be too confining. And I think what I teach, the C paragraph, which is not this, all right? It's not this. I'm actually going to cross this out so you can see that. So I don't teach topic sentence, quote. I don't teach that. The C paragraph is a little bit more flexible to me. So the difficulties of C paragraph or paragraph structure is that it can be too confining, but you can't just ignore it, which it talks about down here. You just can't ignore paragraph structure because it'll confuse your reader. All right. So how I teach paragraph structure is I call them C paragraphs. It's not something I made up. I know other professors at this school use this. I took it from a friend of mine when I was in grad school. He taught it. I thought it was simple and effective and flexible. But it's statement, example, explanation. And so C is a nice little acronym. And notice that right down here, C paragraphs are only for body paragraphs. So don't try to use a C paragraph for an introduction or conclusion. Those paragraphs are slightly different animals, and we'll discuss those later if you want to. So the next 3 slides, one slide is going to talk about statement, the next one's going to talk about example, the next one's going to talk about explanation, and then we'll look at a quick example that I just had from another student. The statement is just another word for topic sentence. All right. It's a baby thesis, where your thesis is an argument. All right. You're trying to prove something in your essay, in a thesis. All right. In a topic sentence, you're trying to prove one aspect of that larger argument. All right. So it should be argumentative. It should be your opinion. And that's something that's very key. I'm not saying that you can't start a paragraph with a quote or a paraphrase or plot summary. I'm not saying that necessarily, but it wouldn't be a C paragraph. And the problem that students have is they want to summarize, they want to quote the entire essay. And so what's great about C paragraphs is if you do it correctly, your opinion starts the paragraph. You say, hey, look, this is my idea, and I want to prove this in this paragraph. All right? If you start with someone else's idea, there's nowhere else to go a lot of times for beginning writers. There's nowhere else to go except for more summary, and that's not what we want. We want your first sentence to be argumentative and your opinion, and narrow enough, focused enough, specific enough to be proven in that one paragraph. All right. So you couldn't argue in a topic sentence, there are 3 reasons why the Civil War ended. I mean, focus on one in that paragraph. Don't try to focus on too many. All right. Because you need to prove it in that paragraph. So that's the statement. It's your opinion and it's argumentative. The example is hard fact. So it's quotes, it's experience, personal experience. Hey, look, when I was in, high school, this happened to me. I mean, that's a fact. That's not an opinion that happened, or you lied. But I can't really tell, if you lied about, your personal experiences. But it's hard fact, statistics. It's paraphrase. It's not your opinion. It just is. All right. A lot of students, they like to summarize. They like to quote. They like to paraphrase. All right. And what that does is it overshadows their own opinion. All right. And that's why I say this down here. It should be the shortest part of the paragraph. All right. And I guess that's not, it's true compared to the explanation. But the example will be longer than the statement. All right. So it should be, maybe it should say, it should be shorter than, it should be shorter than the explanation. This is not your opinion. The example is not your opinion. It's hard fact. But this example, the fact, the quote, is going to help prove the topic sentence. but it doesn't prove it on its own, but it's going to help to prove it. All right. And in a sense, it's the least creative aspect of the paragraph, again, because it's not your opinion. All right. If you're putting down a quote or a summary, I mean, someone else did that thinking for you. And again, it takes some skill to select a good quote, to select a good passage or a fact to discuss. But it's not your opinion. It's not your language. You're just relaying what other people have said. All right. And so it should be shorter than the explanation. And the explanation, to me, it's the most important aspect of the paragraph. All right. It ties the statement together with the example. So it explains why that quote or that paraphrase proves your opinion. All right. It ties the paragraph back to the thesis. So it explains to the reader, hey, this paragraph is helping my overall thesis in this way. It should be the longest part of the paragraph. And let me leave it at that first. All right. One thing that I always tell my students when we're face to face is a lot of people, they give me a quote, or they give me a fact, and they think they've proven the point. So here's the example I always give them. So if your statement, if your paragraph, let me enlarge this a little bit. If your paragraph starts with a topic sentence, and this is oversimplified, but I had an awful weekend. That's something to prove in a paragraph. In that paragraph, you can prove you had an awful weekend. This is the example I always give. And then they might say, as an example, I only slept 5 hours the entire weekend. And they say, well, shoot, that proved it, right? But that didn't. I mean, I only slept 5 hours. That's a hard fact. All right, but that didn't prove the statement. That might prove the statement. And the reason why we know it didn't prove the statement is I can change this and it still makes sense. I had a great weekend. I only slept 5 hours the entire weekend. It's the explanation that would help explain why 5 hours of sleep equals a great weekend or equals an awful weekend. It's the explanation that explains how the example ties with the statement. So something like this, you know, so, you know, this isn't something I do. And sorry, I was a little sidetracked while I was typing that because my dog's back here and it was kind of snoring a little bit. But this is not something I do. But see, in this explanation, I'm going to explain why sleeping 5 hours equals a great weekend. So I went to Vegas with some of my friends and it was great. We didn't even rent a hotel room, and so we played blackjack all night. The only sleep I got was a couple short naps laying in hotel lobbies. All right. And you can explain, hey, look, I haven't seen these people in a long time. It was really nice to see them. You know, it's nice to have a fun time and get away from things. So 5 hours equals a great weekend. And that argument is proven in the explanation. All right. Now, if you say, hey, look, it was an awful weekend, Then you explain it in an explanation.